Do you remember how the world looked when you were 6 years old? Everything felt alive. Colors were brighter. Dreams felt like visits to another dimension. You had an instinct, a gut feeling, that was so sharp you could almost read the air in the room. But then you grew up, and slowly, layer by layer, the fog rolled in. The vivid dreams stopped. The intuition became a whisper, then silence. The world became flat, gray, and strictly physical. You just assumed this is what adulthood feels like. But what if I told you that you didn't just grow up, you calcified? Deep in the geometric center of your brain, there is a tiny organ the size of a grain of rice, the pineal gland. The ancient Egyptians called it the Eye of Horus. The French philosopher Descartes called it the seat of the soul. Biologically, it is a crystal transducer that regulates your light and your sleep. But spiritually, it is the antenna that connects you to everything beyond the physical five senses. And in the modern world, this antenna is under attack. Through fluoride, processed foods, and environmental toxins, this tiny crystal literally hardens. It turns to stone. You are walking around with a concrete wall between you and your own higher consciousness. You haven't lost your magic. You have simply encrusted it in armor. Today, we are going to separate the internet myths from the biological facts. We are going to learn how to chip away the stone. We are going to decalcify the antenna so you can finally see what you have been missing. Chapter 1. The Seat of Awareness. Deep within the geometric center of the human brain sits a structure no larger than a grain of rice. It is singular and unique. While the rest of the brain comes in paired hemispheres mirroring one another, the pineal gland stands alone. It is tucked safely between the two halves of the thalamus, bathed in cerebrospinal fluid and protected by the skull's deepest fortifications. For centuries, anatomists and philosophers regarded this tiny pine-cone-shaped organ with a mix of confusion and reverence. René Descartes famously identified it as the principal seat of the soul. But we do not need to rely on metaphysics to understand its profound importance. In the material and biological sense, it is the captain's chair of human awareness. It is the regulator of our internal rhythm and the biological anchor that keeps us synchronized with the natural world. To understand the function of the pineal gland, we must look at it not as a mystical eye, but as a sophisticated biological sensor. It is a transducer. Just as a microphone converts sound waves into electrical signals, the pineal gland converts environmental light and darkness into hormonal commands. It takes the raw data of the world outside and translates it into the language of the body. When darkness falls, the pineal gland synthesizes serotonin into melatonin. This is not merely a chemical for sleep. Melatonin is a potent antioxidant and a neuroprotective agent that scrubs the brain of cellular debris while we rest. It is the signal that tells every cell in the body to repair, regenerate, and prepare for the next day. However, there is a structural vulnerability inherent in this gland. Unlike the rest of the brain, the pineal gland is not protected by the blood-brain barrier. It sits exposed to the bloodstream, and consequently it acts as a magnet for heavy metals and environmental toxins. It receives the second highest rate of blood flow in the entire body, second only to the kidneys. This high volume of blood flow is necessary for its function, but it also turns the gland into a biological filter. Over time, this filter can become clogged. This is where the modern phenomenon of calcification begins to erode human potential. Calcification is exactly what it sounds like. It is the hardening of soft tissue. Phosphate crystals accumulate inside the gland, forming a hard shell around the functioning cells. In medical autopsies performed on adults in industrialized nations, it is common to find pineal glands that have effectively turned to stone. They crunch under the scalpel. A calcified pineal gland cannot produce melatonin efficiently. It cannot regulate the circadian rhythm. The result is a population that is chronically tired, yet unable to sleep deeply. It creates a state of perpetual jet lag, where the mind is foggy and the will is dampened. The primary architect of this hardening is fluoride. This brings us to the intersection of public health and uncomfortable questions. Sodium fluoride is a common additive in municipal water supplies and dental products. While the narrative surrounding fluoride focuses on dental health, the biological reality is that fluoride has an extreme affinity for the pineal gland. It accumulates there in higher concentrations than in bone or teeth. When fluoride meets the calcium naturally present in the body, it forms a hard, brittle shell. It essentially fossilizes the gland while you are still alive. We must consider the psychological implications of this biological fact. If the pineal gland is the seat of awareness and the regulator of our wakefulness, then suppressing its function does not just ruin sleep, it dulls the edge of human alertness. A calcified gland leads to a docile mind. It creates a ceiling on our ability to focus and perceive. When the hormonal regulator of the brain is encrusted with toxins, the individual becomes reactive rather than proactive. We lose the biological capacity for sharp intuition and deep restorative rest. We become easier to manage and harder to inspire. This is not a matter of magic or hidden spells. It is a matter of chemistry. If you introduce a calcifying agent into a biological system that relies on fluidity and permeability, you break the machine. The pineal gland contains calcite microcrystals that are piezoelectric. This means they generate an electric charge under mechanical stress. This property is found in quartz radios and computer chips. It suggests that the pineal gland is capable of detecting fields and frequencies in ways we are only beginning to understand scientifically. When you bury those crystals under a layer of fluoride and calcium phosphate, you dampen the signal, you cut the wire. The restoration of this organ is possible, but it requires a strategic approach to diet and environment. It requires a rejection of the passive consumption that defines modern life. The first step is the elimination of the source. This means removing fluoride from the equation. Filtered water is not a luxury, it is a tactical necessity for biological autonomy. One must scrutinize toothpaste and dental products, looking for alternatives that do not introduce this heavy halogen into the bloodstream. Beyond elimination, there is the process of decalcification. This is the breaking down of the existing shell. Biology offers us specific tools for this task. Iodine is a critical element in this battle. In the human body, iodine acts as a chelator. It binds to heavy metals and halides like fluoride and escorts them out of the system. Most modern diets are severely deficient in iodine, which allows fluoride to take up residence in the receptors where iodine belongs. By reintroducing iodine through sources like kelp or supplementation, one begins to displace the toxin. We can also look to the plant kingdom for powerful allies. Tamarind has been shown in studies to help excrete fluoride through urine. Turmeric, with its active compound curcumin, offers neuroprotective benefits that fight the inflammation associated with calcification. Foods rich in chlorophyll, such as chlorella and spirulina, act as heavy metal sponges in the gut, preventing toxins from re-entering the bloodstream. Vitamin K2 is another essential component. It acts as a traffic director for calcium. It takes calcium out of soft tissues like the pineal gland and arteries and directs it into the bones where it belongs. Without K2, calcium simply drifts and settles in the path of least resistance, turning our vital organs into limestone.
This journey toward decalcification is not an overnight fix. It is a gradual excavation. It is the process of chipping away the concrete that has settled over your mind. As the shell cracks and the gland begins to function again, the changes are palpable. Sleep becomes deeper and filled with vivid narrative dreams. The fog lifts from the waking hours. Focus sharpens. The feeling of being a passive observer in your own life begins to fade, replaced by a sense of agency and clarity. The concept of the third eye has been hijacked by mysticism, but we must reclaim it as a term of biological function. It is the eye that looks inward and regulates the self. It is the mechanism by which we perceive our place in time. When it is blinded by industrial toxins, we lose our reference point. We drift. But when it is clear, we regain our navigation. This is the physiological basis of awareness. It is about keeping the lens clean. It is about ensuring that the machinery of your consciousness is running on clean fuel and free from the sludge of modern industry. The choice to protect this tiny organ is a choice to protect your own potential. It is an act of defiance against a world that prefers you sedated and asleep. By controlling what enters your body, you control the quality of your mind. You preserve the seat of awareness against the encroachment of the fog. If you are ready to continue this investigation into the hidden mechanics of human health and history, I invite you to join us. Click the subscribe button to ensure you do not miss the next chapter as we dig deeper into the biology of control and the path to freedom. Chapter 2. Crystals in the Dark. Deep within the geometric center of your brain sits a structure that has puzzled anatomists for centuries. If you were to follow the path of your spinal cord up into the cranial vault and trace a line backward from the center of your forehead, you would find it there. It is bathed in cerebrospinal fluid and protected by the dense layers of the neocortex. This is the pineal gland. For a long time, modern medicine dismissed it as a vestigial organ, which is a polite way of saying a useless evolutionary leftover. They believed it was merely an eye that had retreated inside the skull and gone dark. They were wrong. The story of the pineal gland is not just a story of biology, but of physics. To understand why this tiny, pine-cone-shaped organ matters, we must look at what it is made of. In the early 2000s, scientists made a startling discovery inside this gland. They found calcite microcrystals. These are not metaphors or poetic descriptions. They are actual physical structures floating within the gland. These crystals consist of calcium, carbon, and oxygen, and they number in the thousands. What makes these crystals significant is a property known in physics as piezoelectricity. This is a phenomenon where certain solid materials generate an electric charge in response to applied mechanical stress. It works the other way around, too. If you expose a piezoelectric crystal to an electromagnetic field, it vibrates. This is the same principle used in quartz watches to keep time and in radio transmitters to send signals. It implies that the pineal gland is not merely a chemical factory producing melatonin. It suggests that the gland acts as a biological transducer. A transducer is a device that converts one form of energy into another. Your ear is a transducer that turns sound waves into electrical signals for the brain. Your retina turns light into electricity. If the pineal gland contains piezoelectric crystals, it means it has the capacity to detect fields and frequencies that other parts of the brain cannot perceive. It acts as an antenna, sitting in the center of the liquid chamber of the skull, waiting to receive information from the environment. This brings us to the crisis. If you possess a finely tuned crystal antenna, the last thing you want to do is cake it in mud. You would not pour concrete over a radio receiver and expect to hear the music clearly. Yet this is exactly what is happening to the modern human brain.
We are witnessing a phenomenon called calcification. In medical terms, they call it brain sand or corpora arenacea. It sounds harmless enough, but the reality is far more industrial. Over time, the pineal gland accumulates deposits of calcium phosphate. These deposits harden. They form a crust around the internal structure of the gland. As this shell thickens, the flexible biological tissue inside becomes rigid. The crystals are locked in place. The transducer stops vibrating. The antenna goes silent. The question you must ask is why this happens. It is not purely a result of aging. There are children today with pineal glands more calcified than those of the elderly from a century ago. The culprit is environmental, and it enters your body through the most mundane daily rituals.
The primary antagonist in this story is a chemical ion called fluoride. You know it from your toothpaste and likely from your tap water, depending on where you live. For decades, we have been told that fluoride is essential for strong teeth. While its topical application has dental benefits, its ingestion tells a different story. The pineal gland has one of the highest blood flow rates of any organ in the body, second only to the kidneys. It is not protected by the blood-brain barrier, which usually filters out toxins before they reach neural tissue. This leaves the gland exposed to whatever is floating in your bloodstream. Fluoride is magnetically drawn to calcium. Because the pineal gland is rich in calcium crystals, it acts as a magnet for fluoride. When fluoride encounters the calcium in the gland, it binds to it.
It transforms into a hard, brittle compound. This is not a theory. It is observable fact. In the 1990s, a scientist named Jennifer Luke discovered that the pineal gland accumulates fluoride at extremely high levels. In fact, the concentration of fluoride in the pineal gland can be higher than the concentration in your bones. We are essentially fossilizing a piece of our living brain while we are still alive. This process of calcification is accelerated by the modern diet. We consume synthetic calcium in fortified, processed foods, which the body struggles to absorb properly. Instead of strengthening our bones, this cheap calcium settles in soft tissues, including the pineal gland. We eat refined sugars and preservatives that create systemic inflammation. This inflammation signals the body to wall off irritated areas with calcium deposits. It is a defense mechanism gone wrong. The consequences of this calcification are subtle at first. You do not wake up one morning feeling lobotomized. Instead, it is a slow drift into the fog. The first casualty is your sleep. The pineal gland is responsible for the production of melatonin, which regulates your circadian rhythm. When the gland is hardened and full of toxic deposits, its ability to produce and release melatonin is compromised. You find it harder to sleep deeply. You wake up tired. The cycle of rest and repair is broken. But the damage goes deeper than sleep. If we accept the premise that the pineal gland functions as a transducer for environmental cues, then calcification creates a sense of disconnection. It is the feeling of being cut off. The piezoelectric crystals are trapped in stone. The subtle signals of the natural world are muffled. We become numb. We lose that sharp intuition that warns us of danger or guides us toward opportunity. We become reactive instead of proactive. There is a theory that this dampening is convenient for a society that demands compliance.
A population that cannot sleep well and lacks intuition is easier to manage. People who are disconnected from their own biological rhythms become dependent on external stimulation to function. We drink caffeine to wake up. We take pills to sleep. We rely on algorithms to tell us what to like and what to fear, because our internal compass is spinning wildly or has stopped moving altogether. This is not about magic. It is about biology.
If you have a piece of hardware in your head that relies on the vibration of crystals to function, then cementing those crystals into a solid block is a catastrophic failure of the system. The calcified pineal gland appears on X-rays as a bright white spot. It looks like a stone in the center of the brain. Radiologists use it as a landmark because it is so easy to see. Think about the tragedy of that. The seat of your awareness has become a landmark of dead mineral weight. The narrative we are sold is that this is normal. We are told that everyone gets brain sand eventually. But biology does not design organs to turn into stone by accident. This is a result of specific inputs. It is a result of the water we drink, the food we eat, and the chemicals we absorb. The danger of fluoride and synthetic calcium is that they are silent accumulators. You do not feel the ounce of fluoride you drank with your glass of water at dinner. You do not feel the preservative in your bread. But the chemistry is relentless. Day after day, the layers build up. The tomb closes around the gland. We are walking around with antennas that have been wrapped in lead. We wonder why we feel anxious. We wonder why we feel a lack of purpose. We wonder why the world feels flat and gray. We look for psychological reasons. We blame our childhoods or our jobs or the economy. And while those things matter, we rarely look at the physical reality inside our own skulls. We rarely ask if the machinery of perception itself has been compromised. Understanding the composition of the pineal gland changes the way you look at a glass of tap water. It changes the way you look at the ingredients label on a box of cereal. You realize that you are not just feeding a stomach. You are maintaining a delicate instrument. The crystals in the dark need to be free to vibrate. They need to be clean. The good news is that biology is dynamic. The body has a tremendous capacity for repair. Just because a shell has formed does not mean it must remain there forever. The process of calcification is a chemical reaction, and chemical reactions can be reversed. It requires a shift in strategy. It requires stopping the influx of toxins and introducing the right solvents to break down the walls. We have explored the fog. We have explored the seat of awareness, and now we have exposed the crystals and the threat they face. The machinery is clogged, but it is not broken beyond repair. The antenna is still there, waiting to be dusted off. The next step is to understand how to chip away at the stone. We must learn how to dismantle the tomb and let the light back into the chamber. It requires discipline and it requires knowledge, but the path to clarity is physical. It begins with what you put in your mouth, and it ends with the liberation of your mind. Chapter 3. The Calcification Crisis. We have walked through the fog and studied the frequency. We have mapped the anatomy of this tiny regulator and observed the crystalline structures that lie within its dark chamber. Now we arrive at the turning point of our investigation. This is where the biology of the pineal gland collides with the harsh reality of modern living. This is the moment where we stop looking at what the gland is supposed to do and start looking at what is stopping it from functioning. We are talking about calcification. To understand the gravity of this crisis, you must first visualize the texture of the pineal gland in its healthy state. It is meant to be soft.
It is a piece of glandular tissue, fluid and flexible, vibrant with blood flow and chemical activity. It pulses with the rhythm of your circadian biology. However, in the modern human brain, this organ often undergoes a radical transformation. It hardens. It accumulates deposits of calcium phosphate until the soft, active tissue becomes encrusted in a shell. In medical literature, this phenomenon has a name that sounds almost poetic: corpora arenacea. It translates to brain sand. But there is nothing romantic about the reality of it. These are hard, distinct stones forming inside the center of your brain. When a radiologist looks at an X-ray or an MRI of an adult brain, the pineal gland often shines bright white, like a beacon. That brightness is not energy. It is density. It is bone-like material where no bone should be. The question we must ask is why? Why does a gland, essential for our sleep cycles and our hormonal balance, turn into a graveyard of calcium crystals? The answer requires us to look at the unique biology of the gland itself. Unlike most of the brain, the pineal gland is not protected by the blood-brain barrier. This is a critical distinction. The blood-brain barrier is a filtration system designed to keep toxins and heavy metals out of your neural networks. But the pineal gland sits outside this gate. It has the second highest blood flow of any organ in the body, second only to the kidneys. This immense perfusion of blood means the pineal gland is constantly bathed in whatever is floating in your bloodstream. It is a filter. It is a magnet. And because of its internal environment, it is uniquely susceptible to a process called biomineralization. This brings us to the primary suspect in the calcification crisis: fluoride. For decades, the narrative surrounding fluoride has been strictly dental. We are told it builds strong teeth and prevents cavities. We find it in our tap water, our toothpaste, and our mouthwash. But the story changes when you follow the path of that fluoride once it enters the body. Research from the 1990s, specifically focused on the pineal gland, uncovered a startling affinity. The soft tissues of the pineal gland accumulate fluoride at levels far higher than any other soft tissue in the body. In fact, the concentration of fluoride in the pineal gland can be higher than the concentration found in your bones. When fluoride encounters calcium in the blood, it forms a compound. It precipitates out of solution and creates solid crystals. These are the stones that make up the brain sand. As these crystals accumulate, the interior volume of the gland diminishes. The cells responsible for producing melatonin, known as pinealocytes, are squeezed out. They are encased in a tomb of mineral deposits. Consider the implications of this mechanical failure. If the pineal gland is the chemical clock of the body, calcification is like pouring glue into the gears of a watch. The mechanism slows down. The production of melatonin decreases. We see the effects of this crisis everywhere in the modern world. We see it in the epidemic of insomnia and sleep disorders. We see it in the disruption of puberty, where the biological timing of development is shifting earlier and earlier, a process known to be regulated by the pineal gland. When the master regulator is calcified, the rhythm of life falls out of sync. But the physical hardening is only one layer of this story. If we accept the premise we explored in the previous chapter, that the microcrystals inside the gland act as piezoelectric transducers, then calcification takes on a more sinister role. It is not just blocking chemical production. It is dampening a signal. Imagine a finely tuned antenna designed to resonate with specific frequencies. Now imagine encasing that antenna in concrete. It can no longer vibrate. It can no longer receive or transmit effectively. The piezoelectric effect relies on the structural integrity of those crystals. If the gland becomes a solid lump of calcium and fluoride, the delicate expansion and contraction required to generate an electric charge becomes impossible. This leads us to the intersection of health and what many call the conspiracy of silence. It is not a matter of magic or hidden demons. It is a matter of industrial toxicology. We are bathing our internal organs in a substance that turns soft tissue into stone. The pineal gland is the canary in the coal mine.
Its calcification is a measurable physical sign of systemic toxicity. The crisis is compounded by our diet. It is not just the water, it is the calcium itself. In the modern diet, we are obsessed with calcium fortification. We add it to orange juice, we take it in supplements, and we consume processed dairy products. But calcium does not know where to go on its own. It requires a guide. That guide is vitamin K2 and magnesium. In the absence of these cofactors, calcium does not end up in your bones where it belongs. It ends up in your soft tissues. It ends up in your arteries, causing heart disease. And it ends up in your pineal gland, causing calcification. We are literally ossifying our own brains through a combination of environmental toxins and nutritional mismanagement. The psychological impact of this calcification is perhaps the most unnerving aspect. A calcified pineal gland correlates with a lack of dreaming. It correlates with cognitive fog. If we view the pineal gland as the biological seat of awareness or the driver of our intuitive faculties, then a calcified gland results in a population that is biologically numb. People with heavy calcification often report feeling disconnected. They struggle to find a sense of purpose or clarity. They operate on a purely reactive level, driven by the fight or flight mechanisms of the lower brain, rather than the regulated calm insight of the higher regulatory centers. It creates a state of low-level chronic stress, where the body never fully enters the deep restorative cycles of sleep required for true regeneration. This is the calcification crisis. It is a physiological closing of the door. The biological hardware necessary for deep insight and hormonal balance is being systematically degraded. However, the story does not end in despair. Biology is resilient. The body has a tremendous capacity for repair if the assault is stopped. The formation of these crystals is a chemical process, and chemical processes can often be reversed or at least halted. We have identified the enemy. It is the accumulation of fluoride. It is the imbalance of calcium. It is the environmental burden we place on this sensitive, unprotected organ. The calcification of the pineal gland is not an inevitable part of aging. It is a cumulative injury caused by lifestyle and environment. Understanding this mechanism removes the mystery. We are not dealing with a curse. We are dealing with chemistry. And if chemistry caused the problem, chemistry can offer the solution. As we move forward, we must look at how to break up this concrete. We must explore how to decalcify the tissue and restore the flow of blood and melatonin. We must learn how to protect the antenna so that it can once again vibrate with clarity. The crisis is real, and the evidence is visible on the X-rays of millions of people. But the stone can be broken. In the next chapter, we will turn our attention to the practical methodology of restoration. We will explore the specific protocols and dietary changes that can arrest this process. But for now, let the weight of this reality sink in. Your pineal gland is under siege. It is turning to sand. And the first step to reclaiming your clarity is acknowledging the hardness that has formed in the dark.
Chapter 4: The Fluoride Connection. We have arrived at the center of the labyrinth. In the previous chapters, we explored the biological function of the pineal gland and the crystalline structures that lie within its dark chamber. We established that this organ is the regulator of your internal clock and the bridge between your biological systems and your perception of the environment. But now we must confront the primary antagonist in this story. This is the substance that acts as the mortar in the wall of calcification. It is a chemical that has been debated, celebrated, and feared in equal measure for nearly a century. We are talking about fluoride. To understand the impact of fluoride on the pineal gland, we must first strip away the glossy brochure of modern dentistry. For decades, the public narrative has been singular and unyielding. We are told that fluoride is a necessary additive, a triumph of public health engineering designed to protect our teeth from decay. While the dental benefits of topical application are widely documented, the story of systemic ingestion is far more complex and far darker. Let us step back into the industrial history of the 20th century. Before fluoride became a staple in municipal water supplies and toothpaste tubes, it was a difficult byproduct of heavy industry. During the production of aluminum and fertilizer, massive quantities of fluoride gases and waste were generated. This waste was toxic, expensive to contain, and dangerous to the local environment. Through a complex series of lobbying efforts and funded research, what was once a liability was rebranded as a commodity. The solution to pollution was dilution. By adding it to the water supply under the banner of health, the industrial byproduct found a new home in the bodies of the population. This historical context is vital because it sets the stage for a biological accident. When you drink a glass of tap water treated with sodium fluoride or fluorosilicic acid, you're introducing a biologically active compound into your system. Your body attempts to filter and process this element. Much of it is excreted by the kidneys, but a significant portion remains. Fluoride is what chemists call a seeking ion. It has a voracious appetite for calcium. This brings us back to the anatomy of the pineal gland. As we discussed in Chapter 2, the pineal gland is unique among the structures of the brain. It sits outside the blood-brain barrier. This is a critical distinction. Most parts of your brain are protected by a cellular filtration system that prevents toxins, bacteria, and heavy metals from entering the sensitive neural tissue. The pineal gland does not have this shield. It requires direct access to the bloodstream to monitor light signals and secrete hormones rapidly. In fact, aside from the kidneys, the pineal gland receives the highest rate of blood flow of any organ in the body. Because it is bathed in this constant torrent of blood, and because it lacks the protective barrier, the pineal gland is wide open to whatever is floating in your plasma. When that plasma is rich in fluoride, the gland becomes a magnet. Inside the pineal gland are the microcrystals we identified as calcite, or calcium carbonate. Remember that fluoride seeks calcium. It binds to it. It hardens it. Over time, this chemical reaction transforms the fluid crystalline structure of the gland into a hard, brittle mass. This is not merely a metaphor. This is a physiological reality known as mineralization. For years, this phenomenon was dismissed by mainstream medical institutions as a harmless side effect of aging. They argued that a calcified pineal gland was just like a stiff knee or a gray hair. It was viewed as irrelevant. But in the 1990s, a researcher named Jennifer Luke initiated a study that shattered this assumption. Her research provided the first quantifiable evidence that the pineal gland is the primary target for fluoride accumulation in the human body. Luke discovered that the pineal gland concentrates fluoride at levels significantly higher than even the bones or teeth. While the rest of the body might hold a low concentration, the pineal gland acts as a reservoir, hoarding the chemical until the tissue becomes saturated. The soft, receptive tissue turns into stone. The implications of this calcification are profound when we look at the function of the organ. The pineal gland produces melatonin. This hormone is not simply a sleep aid you buy at the pharmacy. It is a powerful antioxidant and a regulator of the onset of puberty. It dictates the rhythm of repair and regeneration within your cells. When the gland is calcified by fluoride accumulation, its ability to produce melatonin is compromised. This leads us to the symptoms of the modern condition. Consider the epidemic of sleep disorders, the disruption of circadian rhythms, and the early onset of puberty in children.
We see a population that is chronically tired yet unable to rest. We see a disruption in the natural biological cycles that keep the human animal grounded in reality. The calcified gland struggles to signal the body that it is time to repair. The result is a subtle accelerated aging and a persistent cognitive fog. However, the conspiracy realist looks deeper than just sleep cycles. If the pineal gland is indeed the seat of awareness, the biological hardware for intuition and insight, then calcification is effectively a lobotomy of the spirit. A calcified pineal gland locks the individual into a purely materialistic and reactive state of being. When the gland is functioning optimally, it utilizes the piezoelectric effect of its crystals to transduce signals. It allows for a heightened state of clarity and focus. It facilitates the kind of deep introspection where complex problems are solved and creative breakthroughs occur. When that structure is encased in a shell of fluoride and calcium phosphate, that resonance is dampened. The signal is lost. This dampening effect serves a potential dual purpose. A population that cannot sleep well is a population that is stressed and anxious. But a population that is cut off from its own intuitive center is also a population that is easier to manage. If you cannot access your own internal guidance system, you become reliant on external guidance systems. You look to media authority and social pressure to tell you what is true because your own biological compass is broken. There is a historical shadow here as well. While the evidence is often debated in academic circles, there are persistent accounts suggesting that water fluoridation was explored in prison camps during the Second World War to keep captives docile. The chemical creates a subtle sedation, a disconnection between the will to act and the ability to execute that action. Whether this was the primary intent of modern water fluoridation or simply a convenient side effect, the result remains the same. We are ingesting a substance that targets the very organ responsible for our highest levels of perception. It is important to understand that this is not a permanent sentence. The body has a remarkable capacity for regeneration. The crystals within the pineal gland can be cleared, and the shell can be dissolved. But this cannot happen as long as the influx of fluoride continues. The first step in reclaiming the function of this organ is to stop the poisoning. This requires a level of vigilance that is uncommon in the modern world. It means looking at the water you drink, the toothpaste you use, and even the processed foods you consume, which are often made with fluoridated water. It means understanding that the convenience of tap water comes with a hidden biological cost. The connection between fluoride and the pineal gland is the smoking gun of this investigation. It explains the mechanism behind the fog we described in Chapter 1. It explains why so many feel a disconnect from their own potential. It is not a failure of character or a lack of discipline. It is a chemical blockage. As we move forward, we will explore how to reverse this process.
We have identified the enemy, and we have mapped the terrain.
Now we must look at the tools required to break down the walls of the fortress. The calcification is hard, but it is not invincible. By understanding the chemistry of the fluoride connection, we arm ourselves with the knowledge necessary to dismantle it. In the next chapter, we will turn our attention to the dietary landscape. We will examine the specific nutrients that act as solvents for this calcification and the foods that accelerate the hardening process. We are moving from diagnosis to treatment. The path to clarity requires us to change not just what we think, but what we consume. The pineal gland is waiting to come back online. It simply needs us to clear the static. Chapter 5. The dietary assault. If the water supply represents the foundational layer of the calcification crisis, then the modern diet is the structure built upon it. We leave the faucet behind and walk into the aisles of the supermarket. To the untrained eye, this environment looks like a cornucopia of abundance. Brightly colored packages line the shelves, and fresh produce glistens under high-intensity lights. But if we peel back the label and look at the molecular reality of what we consume, a different picture emerges. This is not just nutrition. This is a minefield. The assault on the pineal gland is not limited to a single chemical additive like fluoride. It is a cumulative effect of modern convenience. We are navigating a landscape where the very fuel we put into our bodies is often weaponized against our biology. The pineal gland is a sensitive instrument. It acts as a transducer and a regulator of our circadian rhythms and our sense of clarity. When we flood the system with synthetic compounds, we are effectively throwing sand into the gears of a precision watch. The first major antagonist in this dietary narrative is one of the most ironic. It is calcium itself. We are raised on the mantra that calcium builds strong bones. We see it fortified in orange juice and added to cereals and pressed into chalky supplements. The problem is not the element itself, but the form it takes and how the body processes it. There is a profound difference between the organic calcium found in leafy greens or nuts and the synthetic calcium carbonate often used to fortify processed foods. The body recognizes the former as food. It struggles to identify the latter.
When we consume excessive amounts of synthetic calcium without the necessary cofactors like magnesium and vitamin K, the body does not know where to put it. Instead of going into the skeletal structure where it belongs, it ends up in soft tissues. It settles in the arteries. It settles in the joints. And, as we have established, it settles in the pineal gland. This is the mechanism of the stone. We are quite literally turning our softest and most receptive tissues into bone. This creates a physiological cage around the gland. The piezoelectric crystals we discussed in previous chapters become locked in place. They lose their ability to resonate. They lose their ability to expand and contract with the subtle pressures of cerebrospinal fluid. We are eating our way into a state of rigidity.
But the dietary assault involves more than just misplaced minerals. We must look at the protective barriers of the body, or rather, the lack of them. The pineal gland sits outside the blood-brain barrier. This is a crucial anatomical detail. Most of the brain is shielded from toxins floating in the bloodstream by a tight network of cells. The pineal gland does not have this luxury. It is perfused with a tremendous amount of blood flow, second only to the kidneys. This means that whatever is in your blood is in your pineal gland. This brings us to the subject of pesticides and herbicides. Modern agriculture relies heavily on chemicals like glyphosate. This compound is sprayed liberally on crops, particularly wheat and corn and soy. It acts as a desiccant and a weed killer.
When we ingest residues of glyphosate, it wreaks havoc on the gut lining. It loosens the tight junctions of the intestinal wall, leading to a condition often called leaky gut. When the gut barrier is compromised, toxins that should have been eliminated pass into the bloodstream. Once in the bloodstream, they have a direct ticket to the pineal gland. This is the connection between the sandwich you eat for lunch and the brain fog you feel 3 hours later. We are allowing environmental toxins to bypass our primary defense systems. These chemicals are neurotoxic. They create inflammation. Chronic inflammation in the brain is like static noise on a radio line. It drowns out the subtle signals the pineal gland is trying to broadcast. We must also address the ubiquitous presence of heavy metals in the food supply.
Mercury and aluminum are the primary offenders here. Mercury often enters through consumption of larger predatory fish, while aluminum makes its way onto our plates through cookingware and foil and certain baking powders and food additives. These metals are lipophilic, which means they are attracted to fatty tissues. The brain is largely fat. These heavy metals accumulate over time. They do not simply wash away with a glass of water. They bind to cellular structures. In the context of the pineal gland, aluminum has a specific affinity for the calcified structures we mentioned earlier. It is as if the calcification provides a scaffolding for the heavy metals to latch onto. This compounds the problem. Now you have a gland that is not only calcified, but also laden with heavy metals that interfere with electromagnetic conduction.
Then there is the issue of synthetic additives and excitotoxins. Look at the ingredient list of almost any savory processed snack. You will likely find monosodium glutamate, or hydrolyzed vegetable protein, or aspartame. These are excitotoxins. They work by overstimulating the neurons in the brain. They cause the cells to fire rapidly and repeatedly until they become exhausted or even die. For the pineal gland, which operates on a cycle of serotonin and melatonin production, this constant chemical excitation is disastrous. It disrupts the delicate enzymatic conversion processes. If the neurons are constantly screaming, they cannot settle into the silence required for the production of melatonin. This is why a diet high in processed foods often leads to insomnia and a lack of dream recall. We are chemically keeping the brain in a state of high alert, even when we are desperate for rest. Sugar plays a sinister role here as well. The modern diet is saturated with refined sugars and high fructose corn syrup. Beyond the metabolic damage and the insulin spikes, sugar creates systemic inflammation. It causes oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is essentially rust on a cellular level. It produces free radicals that damage cell membranes and DNA. The pineal gland is particularly susceptible to oxidative stress because of its high metabolic rate. It works hard to convert tryptophan to serotonin and then to melatonin. This process requires energy and produces byproducts. If the body is inflamed and antioxidant stores are depleted by a high-sugar diet, the gland cannot repair itself. It begins to function largely at a deficit. The clarity of mind associated with a healthy pineal gland is replaced by the lethargy of a sugar crash. We are also facing the impact of genetic modification. The shift toward genetically modified organisms has altered the protein structures of many of our staple foods. The human body has spent thousands of years adapting to specific biological keys. When we introduce foreign proteins encoded by modified DNA, the immune system often reacts as if it is under attack. This low-grade immune response becomes the background hum of our existence. It diverts resources away from higher cognitive functions and maintenance processes. The body shifts into survival mode. In survival mode, the higher functions of the pineal gland are deemed non-essential. The body prioritizes immediate defense
over long-term insight. It is important to understand that this dietary assault is not accidental in its effects, even if the intent is merely profit. The food industry designs products for palatability and addiction. They target the dopamine centers of the brain. They want you to eat more. They are not concerned with whether your pineal gland is calcified or clear. The result is a population that is well-fed calorically, but starving nutritionally and toxicologically burdened. This creates a closed loop. We eat foods that disrupt our hormones and cloud our minds. We feel tired and disconnected. To combat the fatigue, we reach for stimulants like caffeine and more sugar. These further tax the adrenal glands and disrupt the circadian rhythm managed by the pineal gland. We stay up late staring at blue screens, which further inhibits melatonin. We wake up exhausted and reach for the same processed foods to get us through the day. The cycle repeats. Breaking this cycle requires a tactical approach to eating. It requires seeing food not just as fuel or pleasure, but as information. Every bite communicates something to your biology. You are either telling your body to inflame and calcify, or you are telling it to repair and decalcify. The path out of this maze involves a return to simplicity. It involves eliminating the synthetic variables. It involves understanding that the grocery store is a landscape of traps that must be navigated with extreme caution. We have to stop viewing these dietary choices as mere lifestyle preferences and start viewing them as the defense of our own cognitive liberty. The dietary assault is formidable because it is normalized. It is everywhere. It is social. It is convenient. But recognizing the weapon is the first step in disarming it. As we move forward, we will explore how to reverse this damage. We have identified the enemy in the water and the enemy on the plate. Now we must look at how to strip these toxins from the tissues and restore the crystal to its functional state. The calcification can be halted, the fog can be lifted, but it requires a decision to stop feeding the very process that blinds us. Chapter 6. The Lost Intuition. We have spent the last few chapters dissecting the physical reality of the pineal gland. We have looked at the hard science of fluoride deposition and the dietary habits that turn a functioning biological instrument into a calcified stone. We traced the path of toxins from the tap water to the bloodstream and finally to the center of the brain. But now we must pivot. We must move from the anatomy of the organ to the anatomy of the mind. We need to discuss what happens when the machinery stops working. This brings us to the concept of intuition. In the modern world, intuition is often dismissed as a buzzword or a mystical fantasy. It is treated as something for storytellers and dreamers, rather than a critical survival function of the human animal. But if we strip away the New Age gloss and look at the mechanics of the brain, intuition is simply high-speed data processing. It is the ability of the brain to recognize patterns and process environmental cues faster than the conscious mind can articulate them. It is the feeling of danger before you see the threat. It is the sudden clarity of a solution before you have fully analyzed the problem. This is not magic. It is biology. For thousands of years, this internal radar was the primary tool for human survival. A hunter in the forest did not have a weather app or a GPS. He had a pineal gland that was highly sensitive to changes in light, pressure, and electromagnetic fields. He had a circadian rhythm that was perfectly synced with the rotation of the earth. His body knew when to rest and when to hunt, because his hormonal regulators were firing without obstruction.
The pineal gland acted as the conductor of this chemical orchestra, converting serotonin into melatonin and regulating the sleep-wake cycles that allowed for deep, restorative processing. Now consider the state of the modern mind. We are living in an era of unprecedented anxiety and confusion. People report feeling a persistent brain fog. There is a collective inability to focus, to make decisions, or to trust one's own judgment. We look outside for answers. We rely on search engines and social media algorithms to tell us what to eat, how to sleep, and who to trust. We have outsourced our internal compass to external technology. The question we must ask is why? Why has the human animal, which survived ice ages and predators, suddenly lost the ability to navigate its own life? The answer lies in the calcification we discussed in Chapter 4. When the pineal gland becomes encased in a shell of calcium phosphate and fluoride, its function is dampened. We established earlier that the gland contains piezoelectric crystals.
In a healthy state, these crystals vibrate and react to pressure and frequency, facilitating signal transduction. This is the hardware of your intuition. It is the receiver. When you encase a receiver in concrete, it stops picking up the signal. The silence of the pineal gland results in a physiological disconnect. Without the precise regulation of melatonin, sleep becomes shallow. We lose the REM cycles, where the brain processes emotional data and consolidates memory. Without deep sleep, we wake up in a state of low-level cognitive impairment. This is the gray zone. It is not full-blown dementia, but it is not clarity either. It is a state of reactivity. When you are tired and your hormonal rhythms are out of sync, you cannot access that high-speed processing we call intuition. You become trapped in the slow, logical, anxious forebrain. This loss of intuition serves a function for the systems of control we touched upon in the introduction. A population that cannot trust its gut is a population that is easily led. If you cannot feel the truth, you have to be told the truth. If you cannot sense danger, you will accept the safety measures provided to you by the very institutions that poisoned the water supply. The calcified pineal gland creates a biological ceiling on human potential. It keeps the consciousness locked in the immediate material struggle for survival. Think about the feeling of cognitive dissonance. It is that uncomfortable tension when you hold two conflicting beliefs. A healthy mind resolves this quickly, using intuition to discern which belief aligns with reality. A calcified mind struggles. It gets stuck in the loop of confusion. This makes the individual susceptible to suggestion. Marketing propaganda and political narratives rely on this confusion. They bypass the critical filter of the mind because the biological alarm system is broken. We must also look at the role of serotonin. The pineal gland is a major site for serotonin interaction. Serotonin is often called the happy chemical, but it is really a regulator of mood and stability. When the gland is under assault, the conversion processes are disrupted. This contributes to the widespread apathy and depression we see in industrialized nations. It is not just that people are sad, it is that they are numb. The spark is missing. That spark is the connection between the biological organism and its environment. When we talk about the third eye in this context, we are not talking about seeing ghosts. We are talking about seeing reality. We are talking about situational awareness. The calcified gland is like a dirty windshield. You can still drive, but you cannot see the obstacles clearly. You react too late. You miss the turn. You crash. The tragedy is that most people do not realize the windshield is dirty. They think this blurry, anxious existence
is the default setting of the human condition. They think getting old means getting slower and duller. But history tells a different story. We have records of elders in indigenous cultures who maintained sharp mental acuity and deep insight well into their final years. These were cultures without fluoridated water and without processed diets. They respected the cycles of light and dark. Their pineal glands remained soft and active. They retained their intuition.
They were hard to fool and hard to control. The suppression of this gland is effectively a castration of the will. It reduces the human experience to a series of physical reactions: eat, sleep, work, repeat. The higher functions of creativity, insight, and foresight are dampened. We become excellent workers and terrible thinkers. We become efficient consumers and poor creators. This is the dietary assault, manifesting as psychological containment. This chapter is titled The Lost Intuition, but perhaps it should be called The Stolen Intuition. To lose something implies carelessness. To have something stolen implies a perpetrator. As we have seen with the industrial use of fluoride and the massive push for calcium-heavy processed foods, the environment has been engineered to produce this result.
Whether this was a grand conspiracy or a convenient accident of capitalism, the result is the same. We are operating at a fraction of our capacity. The disconnect goes deeper than just individual anxiety. It affects how we relate to one another. Intuition is also the basis of empathy. It is the ability to read the micro-expressions of another person, to sense their emotional state without words. When this faculty is dulled, we become isolated. We stop understanding each other. Society fragments. We retreat into digital silos because real human connection requires a level of biological resonance that we are struggling to maintain. However, we must not fall into despair. The body is resilient. The term calcification sounds permanent, like rock, but in biology, tissues can be remodeled. The body is constantly tearing down and rebuilding itself.
The suppression of your intuition is a physical condition, and physical conditions have physical solutions. Understanding the magnitude of what has been lost is the necessary fuel for the work ahead. You are not just trying to clean an organ to improve your sleep. You are trying to reclaim your primary interface with reality. You are trying to get your instincts back. You are fighting to remember what it feels like to be fully awake. In the coming chapters, we are going to shift our focus from the problem to the solution. We are going to look at the specific protocols required to break down the calcium shell. We will explore the activators that can stimulate the piezoelectric crystals and restart the flow of hormones. But before we do that, you must sit with this realization. The fog you feel is not you. It is a blockade. The anxiety you feel is not a character flaw. It is a biological signal crying out for repair. The intuition you think you have lost is still there, waiting for the static to clear. We are about to enter the phase of reclamation. We are done describing the cage. Now we start filing through the bars. Chapter 7. The Solar Connection. We have spent a great deal of time discussing what goes into your mouth. We have analyzed the water you drink and the minerals you consume. We have stripped away the layers of calcification caused by modern industrial diets and the pervasive presence of fluoride. You now understand the chemical warfare waging inside the blood-brain barrier. You have the list of solvents and the protocol for detoxification. However, there is a critical component of pineal gland health that has nothing to do with digestion. It is not about what you eat. It is about what you see.
To understand the full function of the pineal gland, we must look at its biological history. In the study of comparative anatomy, the pineal gland is often referred to as the atrophied third eye. This is not a mystical metaphor. In certain species of reptiles and amphibians, the pineal body is literally connected to a light-sensing organ on the top of the skull. It detects light and dark. It regulates the animal's place in the daily cycle. In humans, the gland has retreated deep into the center of the brain, but it has not lost its connection to the light. It is still a photoreceptive organ in its function. It relies on signals sent from the retinas to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and finally, to the pineal gland itself. This signal tells the gland when to work and when to rest.
It dictates the production of essential neurochemicals. The tragedy of the modern condition is that we have severed this solar connection. We have largely removed ourselves from the natural cycle of day and night. Most people spend their days indoors under artificial lighting that lacks the full spectrum of the sun. Then they spend their nights staring at bright screens that mimic the blue light of noon. This creates a state of perpetual confusion for your biology. The pineal gland never receives the strong signal that the day has begun. Consequently, it never receives the clear signal that the day has ended. It remains in a state of dormancy. It becomes sluggish. This lack of activation contributes to the stagnation of blood flow and the accumulation of calcium deposits. Just as a muscle atrophies without exercise, the pineal gland calcifies without the rhythmic stimulation of natural light. The narrative we are sold regarding the sun is one of fear. We are told to hide from it. We are told to slather our skin in chemical barriers and cover our eyes with dark lenses the moment we step outside. While protection from burning is practical, the absolute avoidance of solar radiation is a health disaster. When you wear sunglasses, you are tricking your brain. The dark tint causes the pupils to dilate, but it also signals to the pineal gland that it is cloudy or dark. The brain does not initiate the hormonal cascade necessary to protect the skin or regulate the mood. You are effectively walking through the world in a simulated cave. To decalcify and reactivate the gland, you must reintroduce it to its primary power source. This process is often called sun gazing, but we should strip away the esoteric baggage of that term. We are talking about optical calibration. The protocol is simple, but it requires discipline. It begins in the early morning. Within the first hour of waking, you must expose your naked eyes to natural light. This does not mean staring directly into the burning sun at high noon, which creates damage. It means stepping outside without sunglasses and letting the ambient light of the morning sky hit your retinas. If the sun is low on the horizon and the intensity is manageable, looking toward the light allows the full spectrum to enter the eye. This specific frequency of morning light triggers the production of serotonin. You likely know serotonin as a mood regulator. It is the chemical of well-being. But for the pineal gland, it is raw material. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. If you do not build up enough serotonin during the day through light exposure, you cannot produce enough melatonin at night to sleep deeply and repair the brain. The two are inextricably linked. The second half of the solar connection occurs at sunset. The light spectrum shifts as the sun dips below the horizon, moving into reds and oranges. Observing this shift signals the pineal gland to begin the conversion process. It prepares the body for sleep. It prepares the cells for regeneration. However, this natural calibration is destroyed if you immediately return indoors and turn on LED lights or stare at a television.
This is where the conspiracy of convenience creates a biological prison. The modern home is designed to override nature. To maintain pineal health, you must defend your darkness as fiercely as you seek the light. Once the sun is down, the intake of blue light must stop. If the eyes detect blue light, the pineal gland aborts the release of melatonin. It assumes the sun has risen again. The repair processes halt. The detoxification pathways close. The calcification continues. You must view the sun not as an enemy, but as the timing belt of your entire engine. The pineal gland is the gear that synchronizes you with the rotation of the planet. When that gear is stripped by fluoride and rusted by lack of use, the engine fails. The dietary protocols discussed in previous chapters act as the cleaning crew. They dissolve the stones and flush out the toxins, but the sun is the ignition. You can clean the engine all you want, but if you do not turn the key, it will never run. This solar practice is free. It requires no supplements and no prescriptions. It only requires you to step out of the artificial box you live in. Take the sunglasses off. Let the light enter the optic nerve. Let the ancient biological machinery remember what it was designed to do. By combining the elimination of fluoride, the introduction of nutritional solvents, and the restoration of the solar cycle, you are attacking calcification from every angle. You are removing the physical shell. You are flushing the chemical toxins. And you are reactivating the electrical signaling. This is the trifecta of pineal health. It is grounded in the tangible reality of biology and physics. It rejects the victim mentality that accepts degeneration as a normal part of aging. You have the tools to reverse the damage. You have the knowledge to protect yourself from the environmental factors designed to dull your senses. The path is clear. It requires changes to what you eat, what you drink, and how you live. It demands that you take responsibility for your own biology. The pineal gland is small, but it is the conductor of the endocrine orchestra. When it plays in time, the body heals. When it falls silent, the body decays. We have covered the stone, the poison, the solvent, and the light. You now possess the complete manual for the restoration of this vital organ. The rest is simply a matter of execution. The sun will rise tomorrow morning. The choice of whether to meet it or hide from it is entirely yours. Chapter 8. The Electromagnetic Shield. We have arrived at the final external barrier. By now, you have scrutinized the water you drink and overhauled the food on your plate. You have learned how the sun acts as a battery for your biology, and how specific nutrients can act as solvents for mineral deposits. Ideally, your internal environment is becoming cleaner, and your chemical load is lightening. However, there remains an invisible element that does not enter through your mouth or your skin. It passes through walls. It moves at the speed of light. It is the modern atmosphere itself. We are speaking of the electromagnetic spectrum. For thousands of years, the human body evolved in a specific magnetic environment. We lived in resonance with the magnetic field of the Earth and the full spectrum light of the sun. The nights were truly dark, lit only by the moon and the stars. This was the baseline calibration for the pineal gland. It was a silent world. Today, that silence has been replaced by a deafening noise that we cannot hear. We are bathed in a soup of artificial frequencies. Wi-Fi signals, cellular networks, radio waves, and the 60 Hz hum of the electrical grid surround us at all times. While we cannot see this smog, it interacts with our biology on a cellular level. To understand why this matters for the pineal gland, you must recall the structure of the gland itself. As we established in the first chapter, the interior of the gland contains microcrystals made of calcite. These are not just rocks. They are piezoelectric. In material science, piezoelectricity refers to the ability of a material to generate an electric charge in response to mechanical stress. Conversely, these materials vibrate when exposed to electromagnetic fields. This means the pineal gland is not just a chemical factory. It is a transducer. It acts like an antenna. It is sensitive to fields. When you surround a piezoelectric sensor with constant chaotic artificial signals, you are essentially jamming the radar. The gland is subjected to perpetual microstress. This stress triggers a defensive response. In the body, chronic stress and irritation often lead to inflammation. When tissue is inflamed and irritated for long periods, the body attempts to wall it off or stabilize it. It does this by using calcium. The hardening of the pineal gland is not just a result of fluoride accumulation. It is also a callus. It is a shield built to protect a sensitive instrument from a noisy environment. The assault is twofold. First, there is the ambient radiation from your router, your phone, and the cell tower down the street. This creates the background static that keeps the gland in a state of low-level alarm. Second, there is the issue of light. Light is the primary signal for the pineal gland. It dictates the production of melatonin. When the sun goes down, the reduction in blue light signals the gland to release melatonin, which initiates the repair cycles of the body. In the modern world, the sun never sets. We stare into LED screens that emit a high-intensity blue light spike. This specific wavelength hits the retina and sends a direct signal to the brain that it is noon. The production of melatonin is instantly suppressed. You might manage to fall asleep from exhaustion, but the deep restorative cleaning cycles of the brain are compromised. Melatonin is a powerful antioxidant. It protects the brain from oxidative stress. When you suppress it, you leave the pineal gland vulnerable to damage and further calcification. You are removing the cleaning crew while simultaneously increasing the mess. This brings us to the concept of the electromagnetic shield. If you want to decalcify and reactivate the function of this gland, you must give it a rest. You cannot heal a broken bone if you keep running on it. You cannot heal a sensitive transducer if you keep blasting it with static. You do not need to move to a cave in the mountains to achieve this, but you must create a sanctuary. This starts with the bedroom. This room must be a dead zone for signals.
The first step is distance. Signal strength drops off dramatically with distance. Do not sleep with your phone near your head. Ideally, do not have it in the room at all. If you use it as an alarm, get a battery-powered clock instead. The second step is the router. Most people leave their Wi-Fi running 24 hours a day. While you sleep, you are not using the internet, yet the router is pulsing 10 times a second, filling your home with radiation. Put your router on a timer or manually unplug it before bed. Give your body 8 hours of silence. The third step is lighting. After sunset, you must control your environment. If you flood your home with bright white LED lighting, you are confusing your biology. Switch to warm, dim lights in the evening. Utilize software on your devices that filters out blue light, or wear glasses designed to block those frequencies. You are mimicking the natural fade of daylight into dusk. There is also the practice of grounding. This is not mystical energy work. It is physics. The body builds up a positive charge throughout the day, especially in insulated modern environments. Touching the earth or using grounding equipment
allows that excess voltage to discharge into the ground. It stabilizes the electrical environment of the body. You must view your pineal gland as a precision instrument that has been placed inside a microwave. The diet and the detox protocols are designed to clean the instrument. But if you do not turn off the microwave, the cleaning will be in vain. The goal is to reduce the load. Every hour that you spend away from a screen is a victory. Every night that you sleep in a room free of wireless signals is a victory. You are removing the constant pressure that forces the gland to calcify. You are allowing the piezoelectric crystals to settle. You are letting the radar come back online. This is the final piece of the physical puzzle. We have cleared the water. We have cleared the food. We have cleared the airwaves. The shell that has encased this vital center of navigation is cracking. The calcium is dissolving. The sensors are waking up. Now that we have addressed the physical vessel and the environment, we must turn our attention inward. A healthy pineal gland is not just a biological trophy. It is a functional tool for clarity and focus.
The next stage is understanding what happens when the machinery starts working as intended. We move from the mechanics of repair to the experience of function. We move from the shield to the vision. Chapter 9. Breath as Pressure. We have spent the last few hours examining the external assault on your physiology. We have looked at the chemical additives in the water supply and the dietary agents that lock the pineal gland inside a calcium shell. We have discussed the invisible smog of electromagnetic frequencies that confuse your biological rhythms. These are the external variables. They are the walls of the prison. But removing the walls is only half the equation. You must also jump-start the engine. This brings us to the most overlooked mechanism in the entire pineal protocol. It is not a supplement. It is not a filter you install on your tap. It is the hydraulic system of the human body. We are talking about breath not just as a means of oxygen intake, but as a mechanical force of pressure. To understand why this matters, you have to remember the physical structure of the pineal gland we discussed in the first chapter. Inside the gland, there are microcrystals made of calcite. These crystals are not metaphorical. They are hard, physical structures floating in a fluid medium. In the world of physics, certain crystals possess a unique property known as piezoelectricity. This is a phenomenon where a material generates an electrical charge when it is subjected to mechanical stress or pressure. If you squeeze a quartz crystal, it produces a voltage. The crystals in your pineal gland work on the same principle. Most people go through their entire lives without ever applying this pressure. Their breathing is shallow. It is confined to the upper chest. It barely moves the diaphragm. This keeps the body in a state of low oxygen and low flow. The cerebrospinal fluid, which bathes the brain and the spinal cord, sits relatively stagnant. It washes away waste slowly, but it does not pulse. It does not surge. The ancient understanding of this system was often shrouded in mystical language, but the mechanics are purely biological. Your spinal column is a tube. At the base of this tube is the sacrum. At the top is the cranium. These two bone structures act as a pump for the cerebrospinal fluid. When you inhale deeply, the bones of the skull expand slightly, and the sacrum moves. When you exhale, they contract. This rhythmic motion circulates the fluid that protects and nourishes your central nervous system. When the pineal gland is calcified, it is rigid. It is dormant. To break that shell and to reactivate the piezoelectric potential of the crystals, you need to increase the pressure of that fluid. You need to turn the gentle tide into a wave. This is where the technique of pressurized breathing comes into play. This is not about relaxation.
It is about generating an internal force. When you take a deep inhalation and fully expand the diaphragm, you draw a massive amount of cerebrospinal fluid up from the base of the spine. If you then hold that breath and contract the muscles of the lower abdomen and the pelvic floor, you create a seal. You are essentially squeezing the tube from the bottom up. The physics here are undeniable.
You have a fluid-filled column. You apply pressure at the bottom while preventing the pressure from escaping. The fluid has nowhere to go but up. It shoots up the spinal column and enters the brain cavity with increased force. This exerts mechanical pressure directly on the pineal gland. Remember the piezoelectric effect. When those microcrystals inside the gland are compressed by this surge of fluid pressure, they discharge electricity. This is the spark in the dark room. This is the moment the biological hardware turns on. Many people who practice this style of breath retention report a sudden flash of white light in their vision, even with their eyes closed. This is not a hallucination. It is the firing of the neurons in the visual cortex and the pineal gland itself responding to the electrical discharge. It is a sign that the conductive properties of the gland are still functional, despite the layers of calcification. This practice also serves a secondary purpose in the detoxification process. We talked about nutritional solvents in Chapter 6. We discussed using citric acid and iodine to dissolve the calcium shell. But a solvent works best when it is agitated. If you soak a dirty pan in soapy water, it helps. But if you scrub it, the grime comes off faster. Pressurized breathing is the scrub. It forces fresh, oxygenated blood and cerebrospinal fluid into the deep recesses of the brain tissue. It flushes out the stagnant toxins that have settled there over decades of shallow breathing. You must approach this with respect for your own biology. This is not something you force to the point of passing out. It is a gradual conditioning of your vascular system. You are training your body to tolerate higher levels of energy and pressure. Start by observing your natural breath. Notice how little of your lung capacity you actually use. Notice how the abdomen rarely moves. To begin the protocol, you simply deepen the rhythm. Inhale for a count of 4, pushing the belly out. Exhale for a count of 4, pulling the belly in. Do this until you feel a slight tingling in the hands or face. That tingling is oxygen saturation. It is the fuel. Once you are oxygenated, you take the final deep breath in. You fill the lungs completely. Then you hold it. You do not let the air out. You clamp down on the pelvic muscles and the abdominal wall. You visualize and feel the pressure rising up the spine. You are pushing the fluid into the chamber of the mind. You hold this pressure for 10 or 15 seconds. Then you release. The release is just as important as the hold. When you let the breath go, the pressure drops instantly. This rapid decompression creates a vacuum effect that pulls fresh blood into the gland. It is a flushing mechanism. Doing this daily changes the environment of the brain. It shifts the pH balance. It creates an environment where calcification cannot easily maintain its grip. The hard shell begins to crack, not just from the chemical solvents you are eating, but from the internal pressure you are generating. There is a reason this knowledge has been kept obscure or wrapped in riddles. A population that breathes shallowly is a population that lives in survival mode. Shallow breathing keeps the nervous system in a low-level state of fight or flight. It keeps the focus on immediate threats and basic anxiety. Deep, pressurized breathing shifts the nervous system into a state of dominance and clarity. Chapter 10. The Return of the Dream. We have spent the previous chapters dismantling the physical cage.
We have looked at the layers of calcium phosphate that encase the pineal gland like a shell around a pearl. We have examined the fluoride in the water supply and the electromagnetic frequencies that saturate our living spaces. We have discussed the specific solvents found in nature and the pressure generated by breath. We have done the heavy lifting of excavation. Now we must look at what happens when the dust settles. We must look at the result. For many who undertake this protocol, the most startling change does not happen while they are awake. It happens when they close their eyes.
The modern adult often views sleep as a simple black void.
It is a gap in the timeline of their day. You close your eyes, you lose consciousness. The alarm rings, you wake up. This black void is accepted as normal. It is viewed as deep rest. However, from a biological and neurological perspective, this absence of internal narrative is not a sign of efficiency. It is often a symptom of suppression. When the pineal gland is calcified and sluggish, it struggles to produce adequate amounts of melatonin. It fails to regulate the delicate chemical transition required for deep REM cycles. The brain is denied its nightly maintenance phase. It is during these cycles that the mind processes data and runs simulations. It is where emotional memory is sorted and stored. When you strip away the interference, the first thing that returns is the dream.
This is not the hazy, fragmented memory of a dream that fades seconds after waking. The return of the dream after a pineal detox is a visceral, high-definition experience. It comes with a shock of clarity. Users often report colors that are more vivid than waking life. They describe complex narratives and a sense of presence that feels indistinguishable from physical reality. This phenomenon is known as the REM rebound, but in the context of pineal health, it signifies something more profound. It signifies that the hardware is coming back online. The return of the dream can be intense. As the gland begins to function without the dampening effect of calcification, the floodgates open. The brain begins to process a backlog of information. For the first few weeks, this can manifest as chaotic or even frightening imagery. It is a neural purge.
The mind is cleaning house. It is dusting off the archives and organizing the files that were left scattered during the years of fog. This is a necessary part of the process. It is the psychological equivalent of the physical detoxification we discussed in Chapter 5. We must understand that dreaming is a survival mechanism. It is the internal simulator of the human organism. It allows us to practice scenarios and process fears without physical risk. When this function is suppressed by a poor diet and environmental toxins, we lose our ability to mentally rehearse. We become reactive instead of proactive. We become anxious because we have not processed our stressors in the safety of sleep. The return of the dream is the return of this vital biological advantage. This brings us to the secular reality of the third eye.
We need not invoke spirits or mysticism to understand why this concept has persisted for millennia. In a purely physiological sense, a fully functioning pineal gland grants a heightened state of awareness. When your sleep is restorative and your hormonal cycles are synchronized, your waking cognition changes. You notice patterns faster. You read micro-expressions with greater accuracy. You connect dots that others miss. This is what the ancients may have called intuition or second sight. In our modern context, we can call it high-speed data processing. It is the difference between a computer running on a clogged processor versus one running on clean, optimized hardware. The intuition is not magic. It is the result of a brain that is rested, oxygenated, and free from chemical interference.
The pineal gland acts as the conductor of this orchestra. When the conductor is asleep, the music is chaotic. When the conductor is awake, the rhythm is precise. You will notice this shift in your waking life as well. The brain fog that seemed like a permanent companion begins to lift. The mid-afternoon crash disappears. Your focus becomes a laser rather than a scattered beam. This is the direct result of melatonin and serotonin regulation. These hormones do not just control sleep, they control mood and focus and cognitive endurance. By clearing the pineal gland, you are essentially upgrading the operating system of your mind. The journey we have taken from the introduction of fluoride to the implementation of breathwork was never just about a small gland in the center of the head.
It was about reclaiming the full capacity of human consciousness. The calcification of the pineal gland is a metaphor for the numbing of the modern human. We are overfed and undernourished. We are overstimulated and underrested. We are calcified. But the biology is resilient. The body wants to heal. It wants to return to homeostasis. As you maintain the protocols of diet and darkness and protection, you will find that the dream state is only the beginning. The real change is the return of your agency. You are no longer a passive observer of your life, looking through a dirty lens. You are the director. You are seeing the world in high fidelity for the first time in years. This is the return of the dream. It is not a flight of fancy. It is a sign of health. It is the proof that the crystal chamber is clear and the signal is strong.
Keep the diet clean. Keep the water pure. Protect your sleep. The dream is not an escape from reality. It is the training ground for mastering it. The pineal gland is your tool. Keep it sharp. Epilogue. Clarity in a clouded world. We have journeyed from the biological depths of the crystal chamber to the harsh realities of modern industrial toxins. This exploration was never about unlocking supernatural powers or escaping into fantasy. It was always about reclaiming the biological instrument that allows you to perceive the world with absolute precision. You now understand the heavy weight of dietary choices and the subtle pressure of environmental factors like fluoride and artificial light. The path to decalcification is paved with rigorous discipline rather than magic. It requires the systematic removal of heavy metals and the consistent introduction of restorative nutrition. By protecting this small endocrine engine, you allow your natural circadian rhythms to stabilize and the persistent cognitive fog to finally lift. The ultimate result is not a mystical awakening, but a return to optimal human function. You now possess the necessary tools to filter out the noise and properly nourish the mind. The cloud has finally lifted, and what remains is the simple yet profound power of a clear and focused consciousness, ready to engage with reality.